Hey guys, so welcome to my week 9 and 10 update. I'm going to make these into one big update just because I really haven't either been around for the updates lately. I was out of town last week and then some kind of crazy stuff happened last week before we went out of town, and then this past week has just kind of flown by and been crazy weird. So I don't anticipate filming 2 weeks in one much, but when it has to happen, unfortunately, that's just kind of how it's going to be. So hopefully you're okay with that. Also, yeah, I am in my comfy clothes today because it is raining outside. It is just dreary and cold and gross, and so I put makeup on, but then I put my sweatshirt on, so it kind of negated the whole thing. So hopefully you don't mind any of that. Let me readjust you here just a little bit. Okay. So let's get started with week 9. Currently I am 11 weeks and 1 day. So 2 weeks ago I was 9 weeks. I went in for my appointment, which is where you saw that last, that last one. Update. And the day after, let me think, no, that night, so I filmed that update that day about the doctor's appointment. I told you about the or the ultrasound. Everything was great, everything was fine, perfect, whatever. So that night at around 11 o'clock, I started getting a lot of cramping, like in the front, and a lot of bleeding. And just up front, let me just say, this vlog is going to contain quite a bit of TMI. As with pretty much every pregnancy update vlog that you watch, you have to share some pretty personal stuff and some pretty, I don't know, some just stuff that you wouldn't normally just tell strangers. So it is a little bit uncomfortable to share this information, but at the same time, I think that when I was dealing with what I'm about to tell you with, I was really thrilled that there were some people on YouTube who had shared the same information. So I want to make sure that I share this information because I want to be able to help people if they need information. So if you're grossed out by it, you don't want to hear about it, whatever, you don't have to watch this video, or you can just fast forward on to further stuff in the video. This one might be a little bit long just because I am having to explain some things. But there you go. So anyway, lots of bleeding. I was going through, it was almost to the point where, like, when you would go to the bathroom, you'd wipe and the entire thing of toilet paper was completely red. And it was like, I'm trying to think of a good color I have, like bright red. It wasn't old, it wasn't deep, it wasn't pink, it was red, like bright red. So I called the doctor on call at my doctor's office. Granted, I haven't still seen my OB. I've seen my nurse, I've seen the nurse, and I've seen the PA, but I haven't seen the OB yet. So I'm like calling these people going, who's your doctor? Well, it's so-and-so, but I haven't really seen her yet. Acting kind of like, I promise I go to this practice. I've just only been there one time. And so I talked to the doctor on call, and she was like, it doesn't sound like it's too bad. At this point, I couldn't sit down. Like, sitting down was causing a ton of pressure, like lower back pain, rectal and other pressure. When I sat down, it was just like, it was the most uncomfortable thing. Laying down hurt, sitting down hurt, standing up made me dizzy, so I didn't really want to do that. So she said, it'll probably get better, just wait it out. If you feel like the pain gets worse or the bleeding gets worse, come to the emergency room, she said, but just call your doctor in the morning and they'll probably want to see you. So my doctor's office opens at 8, or 8 or 8:30, I think. So I was waiting to I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back to bed. I'm going to call them in the morning, and then I'll probably end up going in, that morning. So I go back to bed, and I lay there, and I make it to about 7, and it was like, nope, I can't anymore. This pain is just too much. I was able to sleep somehow. I don't really know how that happened, but I was able to sleep through the night, and And then in the morning, it was just like, okay, we just need to go because I don't want to wait. What if they say that they don't have anything in the morning and I have to wait until either the next day? I was supposed to work that night. So I was like, no, let's just go in. They'll check me out at the hospital and then we'll just, you know, we'll be fine. Now, normally I'm not the kind of person to go to a hospital. Like, I don't enjoy it at all. I'm not one of those people that's like, you know, my doctor's office is closed, so I'll just go to the hospital. Usually it's like I can wait it out until they're open the next day. It's no big deal. You know, I'm not about to pay the copay, first of all. And then also, you know, people who have huge emergencies go to the hospital. I'm not one of those people who have huge emergencies, so I don't feel like it's necessary for me to take up their time being seen there. It was a little different that morning though, because I was still bleeding a ton. I was going through 2 pads in an hour. Like, it was just like soaking through. It was just nuts. And I was pretty sure that I'd lost the baby. Like, I was just convinced that that's what had happened. And because there's no way that you can go through that much cramping and that much bleeding and not have something happen like that. Like, everything that I'd heard and everything that I'd ever read all led to this is what had happened. So so I thought, okay, well, obviously it's not going to stop. I'm just going to have to go and, you know, they're going to have to do something about it. A DNC or, you know, whatever it is that they would want to do. So we get to the hospital, and apparently I'm pretty pale at that point. I know I feel really dizzy, but I just didn't take the time to look in a mirror, I guess, because when the nurse or the tech, you know, the transport person who came to get me, he was like, you know, we have wheelchairs. Do you want a wheelchair? And I said, no, I'm fine. He goes, really? You don't want a wheelchair? And then about halfway down the hallway to the room, it was like, oh, I should have taken that wheelchair because I got super dizzy. Luckily, it was close to the room, so I didn't, you know, fall over or anything. But so they got me in. They hooked me up to, let's see, what did they do? They got a urine sample. They did my blood pressure, temperature, you know, all the basic stuff. Got my vitals. They filled in all the information. They asked all the questions. Then they started an IV. They never actually had to do anything with the IV, but I think they were thinking I may be dehydrated. So, and at that point I probably was, because I hadn't had anything to drink since 11 o'clock the night before. So, and at this point it was probably like 8 or so in the morning. So, I think they were probably thinking I would need that, but they didn't. And then, so then they were like, okay, well, you know, we're going to have to do an ultrasound just to make sure that, you know, just to see what's going on. The ER doctor came in and he said, you know, it could have been trauma from the ultrasound from the first appointment. Sometimes that causes bleeding. It causes things to shift a little bit. And I'm thinking, okay, there's spotting and then there's what I'm doing. And, you know, it is not from the ultrasound. So he said he wasn't concerned and that we should just figure this out and that he was sure it was fine. I didn't see him for the rest of the time, so I basically just saw the nurses, which is fine because I really liked them a lot. But that's another thing about going to the hospital, is that you hardly ever like get that one-on-one attention with your doctor that you really want. Anyway, back to my thing. So I go in and I get the ultrasound done, and that was terrifying. It took about 45 minutes to do the ultrasound. They did one on the outside with the wand first, and then they did an internal. So that's why it took so long. They had to do both. And the first thing that the lady said, the tech, and I know she's not supposed to do this. She knows she's not supposed to do this. She even told me she wasn't supposed to do this. But I was so grateful that she did. And she said, oh, look, there's the baby and there's the heartbeat. And she showed it to me. And it was like, it was the greatest feeling in the world, knowing that, okay, you know what? I may not be okay, but the baby's fine, and that's all that matters. You know, it's just like, at that point, they could do whatever they needed to me. I didn't care. But that's all I cared about. So that was a huge relief. She did also mention that she saw a little pocket of blood when she was doing the ultrasound, and she said, you know, it's not too big, it's not something I'm worried about, but let's just take a couple more pictures and we'll figure out what's going on from there. So little did I know that the whole time I was in the hospital, they were actually talking to my doctor, my OB, like my personal OB. So that was really nice, because usually what happens is then you have to fill your doctor in, or they ask for the records when you go to their office or whatever later. But they were calling her and talking to her about what was going on, so she was kind of controlling care at that point, which is probably why I didn't see the ER doctor much. So I was in the hospital for another, I think total, we were probably there for like 6 or 7 hours. My blood pressure dropped really low. I think at one point it was, so normal is 120/80. And normally I have lower blood pressure, but it's never like this low. I think the last they checked it was 102/57 or something. So, I mean, it was kind of like, it was just not what you want it to be, you know. So I think they wanted to keep me there for a little while just to make sure that I didn't bottom out, you know, that I could still, whatever. Of course, they also didn't give me anything to drink or eat because they said that they needed the doctor to tell me what was going on, and if for some reason I needed surgery, they didn't want me to have to delay it. Well, that was the wrong thing to say, because then I'm like, oh my gosh, what kind of surgery would I need? You know, I mean, at that point, you're just kind of delusional anyway because you're in a hospital and you just want to figure out what's going on. Then adding lower blood pressure to it on top of it, and then not having eaten or had anything to drink in a while, it's like, okay, whatever, just do whatever. So, when they discharged me, they said that it was a threatened miscarriage. And they didn't explain anything. They just said, go home, take it easy, don't go to work, and stay in bed. So I was like, okay, you know, I mean, and I trusted that, that's fine. But I did something that no one should ever do, and that was Google. So yeah, don't Google it. So I Googled threatened miscarriage, and it was like, you're going to miscarry, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So no matter what you do, then it's still going to happen. You can't control it. Some doctors put you on bed rest, some don't, but whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So anyway, so then I went home and just kind of laid there for a little while, and then I started to think about what the ultrasound tech was saying about that pocket of blood, and she had mentioned that there's something called a subchorionic hemorrhage. And I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not, but and so I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, well, you know, let me look that up and see what that is, because she seemed pretty sure, and you know, she sees this a lot, I'm sure, you know, she is the person who does these ultrasounds, so I'm betting that she knows what she's talking about. So I researched that a little bit, and basically what that is it's a pocket of blood. And they can range in size, and they form within the creases of your placenta or between the placenta and the uterus. And so baby's in the placenta, and then that is attached to the uterus. And so that is what keeps everything in. The placenta is kind of like that's the organ that you build when you're pregnant. That houses the baby, that feeds the baby, that, you know, it's kind of its little world, you know. So, so there was a pocket of blood in there. So, it turns out that that's what had happened, that I had, and may still have, a subchorionic hemorrhage. And basically, it is a little bit scary still, because they can go away and come back. They can get bigger, and then they can cause miscarriage. And a lot of times what happens is hospitals will say threatened miscarriage for a lot of reasons. One of them is that they don't know what's going on, so they just say that that's what's going on. Another one is for insurance reasons. They say it because that allows them to have more ultrasounds. Insurance will cover multiple ultrasounds rather than just one. So if you say it's a threatened miscarriage, they'll allow the internal and external. If they needed to do one before I left, they would have been able to do that. Other tests too as well, but that's kind of why they did that. It would have been nice to know before so that I wasn't freaked out while I was in there. But that's kind of how that one is. So anyway, so with the subchorionic hemorrhage, basically what will happen or can happen is, it's the way it's situated, it will either drain, and that's why you're bleeding, is that it's draining. So it will either drain all the way and reabsorb itself, it will partially drain and just stay the same. They can also get bigger, so it can stop bleeding and it can just accumulate more blood and get bigger. And then if that happens, what can also happen is that it can be in a really bad place. So where the placenta is attached to the uterus, it can be, you know, up at the top or on the side or on the bottom or whatever. And if it's somewhere where, you know, so say it's at the top and it's really big, well, if it ruptures, that separates the placenta from the uterus, and that causes you to miscarry. So, so far, everything seems to be okay. When she saw it, she said mine was very small. I have since stopped bleeding. I bled for probably 3 days after the hospital visit, and cramped that whole time too. None of it was as bad as the first night, but there was bleeding and cramping and whatever. And so then it stopped, and it's gone from there. I mean, that's been 2 weeks, and it hasn't come back yet. So that's really comforting to know. The nurses don't seem to be worried at my OB office. My OB doesn't seem to be worried. She had said it originally when we went on our trip, because this is right before we were going to Disney. So she said, well, just go to Disney. You may need just some distraction. Just, you know, take your mind off of it. Just take it easy and stay hydrated. But, you know, that's, you know, just take your mind off of it. And so, and she said, we'll see you when you get back. So when we came back, we called and let her know what was going on, and that I hadn't been bleeding, I hadn't been spotting, I hadn't been cramping, everything was fine. And she said, well, let's just keep your appointment for 2 weeks, you know, away. So she doesn't seem too concerned about it. I'm sure they'll do another ultrasound when I go in just to make sure. But everything seems to be okay right now. So that's kind of a relief to know that things seem to be okay. I'm still kind of in the back of my mind a little bit worried, just because in that first trimester everything is so fragile, or it just seems fragile, you know, and you know, when you're further along in your pregnancy, you can feel the baby, you know that they're there and that they're moving and that things are okay. But before you can do that, you don't know what's going on, and so you have to trust in ultrasounds, and you have to wait. And I think that's the part that I have a hard time with, because I don't know what's going on. I know that I'm not bleeding and I'm not cramping anymore, but I don't know that that didn't do something, that didn't do damage, you know? So I'm trying to think positively. I'm sure it's fine. Everything's okay. I'm still having symptoms, like pregnancy symptoms, so that's good. But that's kind of where that one is right now.